Hey, welcome back to Learning Self-Reliance. My name is Roland, and today we're going to talk about a pretty cool thing that I've put together, which is the ability to store dry goods in mason jars. I've got a couple of tools here, and this has been a long process in the making over a few years. This started off as an experiment with freeze drying at home, which was unsuccessful, but I have learned quite a bit about storing dry goods. So I'm going to take you guys in for a close-up and we'll talk about these tools and how this system works. Okay, so let's start off with the basics of this system. For anybody who doesn't know, this is a mason jar. This is a small mason jar, and here we've got a larger one, and all the way up to half-gallon size mason jar here. The lids of these, whenever you can with them, you have to replace the lid every time. You do not have to replace the ring. The ring can be used multiple times, but this lid has to be replaced every time you can with it. But the cool thing about storing dry goods using this mason jar system is that even though you've canned with the lid and you need to use a new one, you can use the used mason jar lid and store dry goods with it, which is pretty cool. So you can keep something that you'd normally throw away and use it for another purpose. This is a regular mouth mason jar, and this right here is a Foodsaver mason jar adapter here. So this guy fits onto the top of a mason jar and allows you to hook an adapter hose to this and suck the air out, which is pretty cool. This is a wide mouth one. So they offer two versions. I think these are about $8 or $9 a piece. So you probably want to get both of these, that way you can vacuum seal any size mason jar with this. The cool thing is you don't need a larger system or something to seal a small one or a large mason jar. You can just use these two adapters here. So when I first started with this, I looked around online and I wanted a way to vacuum seal this that didn't require electricity. I started off with this brake bleeder pump. So this little guy, you just pump it like this, attach a hose to the front and to this guy, and it will suck out the air out of it so that you can apply a vacuum to the mason jar. But the problem with this one is that, one, it's made out of brass and they use some lead or something like that in the process of making this, so it warns about not having it near any food grade things. So I tested it just to kind of see how it worked, and I found that even in spite of the lead warning, that this was extremely slow compared to the other things that I got. So after I tried this, I decided to go something a lot faster. So I went and got this guy. This is a hand crank vacuum pump. It's pretty cool actually, because it sucks in on this side and outputs on this side, so you can apply pressure or apply a vacuum or something depending on which side you hook it up to. This guy is expensive though. It costs about $100. This was intended for teachers in a classroom to teach about how vacuums work to their students. This guy was good because it is really fast, but I don't find it to be as nice as the next part, which is the pump and seal. This is what I settled on, is the pump and seal, because it is really compact but also very fast. The pump and seal is intended, you can look up the YouTube video, I might include a link down at the bottom, but it's this hilarious 90s infomercial, you guys can watch it, but the infomercial is pretty bad, but the product is really good. It's got a little adapter hose that comes out the side here that you can plug in, and it also has this little red plug to plug up a hole. So the bottom of this suction cup here was meant to be used to vacuum on the top of like a mason jar like this, and you have a little tab. You poke a hole and put a little tab over top of it and vacuum it. But I didn't like that because I didn't want to damage my mason jars. And so I just take the little plug that this comes with, which is intended to fit in this guy. I just moved it down to the bottom, and I plugged in the adapter hose onto the side. And this hose was meant to be used to seal things like Ziploc bags and stuff like that, which I did not care for. I'm not interested in sealing in Ziploc bags. And then I squeezed that really difficultly, but I got it in here into this adapter hose from Foodsaver. I'll include a link to all these things down below, but you just put the Foodsaver adapter, I think this guy costs like $8 or something like that as well, and it's meant to plug into a Foodsaver accessories like this, and it actually originally had both sides had this on either side, but I just sliced one side off of it and I use it with the hose like this. So let me show you guys a quick little demonstration about how this works. We'll start off with this large mason jar. So this guy doesn't have a vacuum on it anymore. I'm going to put this Foodsaver adapter on there, the accessory hose. Let me zoom back so you guys can see this. Okay, so originally when they wanted to use the accessory thing, they were expecting that you would have this on here and then it would create a vacuum like that. But I really didn't like that because it kind of slips around. So I just put the plug in the bottom and I just pumped it by hand like this. You won't really be able to hear it on camera, but in person you can hear this sucking out the air of the can because the lid's going up and down a little bit. You can kind of hear that. A large jar like this takes quite a few pumps to get done, but this brake bleeder here is just terrible. Takes much longer. Anyways, we'll pump this guy for a minute and we'll apply a vacuum to it, and then I'll show you guys how strong this vacuum is. It's pretty cool. Okay, something like that. When you get this, it's probably hard to see on camera, but the spring becomes compressed and kind of forms these little curves in it. And once I get a couple of those, I usually just call it good. So if you watch this, this will expand when I pull this off. You can actually hear the vacuum setting on the lid. Okay. Hopefully you guys saw that lid coming out like that, or the pump coming out like that. So there we go. This vacuum is applied. It's actually quite a strong vacuum too. So the cool part about this is that you can take dry goods like nuts and grains and things like that, like flour or something, if you have, you open it, you don't use it that quickly, a bunch of other stuff, cereal or whatever you feel like, just dry stuff like this, and it will extend its shelf life by a lot and will prevent bugs and things growing in it because there's a vacuum. It's not at atmospheric pressure like they would expect. Let me show you guys another example with these marshmallows here. So I'm going to show this up close so you guys can kind of see the size of these marshmallows, all right? I'm going to pull the vacuum off, and this is a great example because it really highlights what this guy can do. Let me angle this back for you guys so you can kind of see these shrink a bit. Come on. Kind of hard to get it out by hand sometimes. Woo! All right, got it. So there we go. Those are shrunk a lot. So the reason I've got these is because with my bees, sometimes you need to grab, you've got your queen cage and you use some marshmallows to replace the cork with. That way the bees can eat through it and the queen can get out a couple of days after they've acclimated to her pheromones. So we'll just reseal this guy. We'll take the large adapter again. Just push it down. It's not hard. It doesn't have to lock or screw on or anything. Just push it down. Put the adapter hose on. Pump away. I'm going to leave this on the side so hopefully you guys can kind of see these marshmallows expand. I've unsealed and resealed these marshmallows quite a few times, so they are a bit worn out. When you initially do this with marshmallows, I find that the entire jar will be filled up and then they'll kind of sink back down after some of the air escapes. Okay, there we go. Vacuum reapplied. There we go. Doesn't come off or anything, it's fantastic. Another really cool use for this is with oxygen absorbers. So my wife and I did our food storage with 5-gallon buckets and put in a couple of oxygen absorbers into every bucket. But we ordered more oxygen absorbers than we needed, and so I quickly took the oxygen absorbers, put them in the bucket, and then put them in this jar and vacuum sealed it really quickly. And so these guys are still good because there's barely any oxygen in here after the vacuum. So they probably absorbed a little bit, but they're still just plenty good. I might toss one extra in a bucket or something just in case, but I think they're just fine. So that's a cool way to extend and buy these in bulk. You could put them in like a half-gallon mason jar or something like that, or a couple of these, and you can have a whole bunch of them on hand, and you don't have to worry about the them getting worn out. I've never had one of these come unsealed before. I've had this thing of bananas here, which is just, this is actually 3-year-old bananas, and I'm going to talk about how I made these in just a second, about the freeze drying that I was attempting. So these are actually about 3 years old. I'm not going to eat these. They're starting to look pretty bad. About a year ago, they started to turn brown like this. So I'm sure these aren't good to eat anymore. But it's been a fun experiment, and the seal is actually still good on these. So the reason I got started in all of this was that I was looking for a way to freeze dry at home, and I've seen quite a few people talk about using silica gel beads like this and then applying a vacuum to a mason jar, keeping it in the freezer, and it's supposed to freeze dry it, which I cannot replicate at all. I've seen a couple people on YouTube talk about it, and they're like, oh yeah, here's these cool apples I did, and I do not get the same result at all. They talked about like applying the vacuum twice a day and making sure it was cold and all this stuff, and I did it all, and I tried a few variations, and I never got even close to it. I just ended up with these more dehydrated apples versus freeze-dried apples. So I just kind of call this freeze dehydration, and it's really not an effective method. These silica gel beads are actually really cool because they come purple, but when they absorb water, they become pink, they come blue, but as they absorb water, they become purple or pink. And you just heat them up in the oven at like 250 for like an hour, and they'll expel all their water and become blue again, and they can be reused. So this is kind of a cool thing to have lying around just for, I don't know, whatever you want to come up with that you need to dry something out, like a cell phone or something like that. But I do find that the beads, little pieces of the beads fall off and get stuck on the food, and so you end up having like what feels like glass on there. It's not quite as sharp as glass, but this whole system failed and I wouldn't recommend it. But it was a fun experiment and got me started on this. Another example of some food you can keep is chocolate. So if for anybody who's kept chocolate for a long time, you start to notice that the chocolate becomes covered in kind of a white powder. But if you put it directly in a mason jar, you can vacuum seal it and it'll last years without having that white powder and stuff form on it. I have these chocolate in a vacuum in here, but I just left them in the bag because I was like, I don't want to open it, I'm just going to toss it in there. So these guys have been in here for about a year now and they're doing just fine. One thing I wanted to mention towards the end of this video is the electric Foodsaver vacuum pumps. I don't like these because they require electricity, but they do work all right. I don't have one of the large full-size ones that can do bags. If you do get one of the large full-size ones, make sure it has an accessory port so you can actually use this hose. But I just got this little handheld version which has a battery and you just recharge it. And it actually works decently to get this on the lid. You just got to push down firmly and it'll apply a vacuum to it. So if you have a handicap or something like that, you could go with something like this. But again, you need electricity for it, and I really am not a fan of that. This really doesn't take much effort at all. I mean, if you were doing 100, 200 of these mason jars, this would probably be a bit slow, and you'd want something electric. But this will always work just fine. So I wouldn't recommend the electric versions of the Foodsaver stuff unless you need that for some reason. But I really think the pump and seal is the best. This guy, let me get a close-up with the camera so you guys can see here. It's just pump, the letter N, and seal, okay? And it is about $35. They have this pretty ghetto website. You can just Google them, and I'll include a link in the description. And it's about $35 without shipping. And they improved their website. They put PayPal on there. They used to have this ghetto credit card thing that I put my credit card in, but luckily nothing bad happened from that. But yeah, this is a quick summary video talking about this. I'm sure you guys will have some comments, but the reason I really like this is with these two, the pump and seal and the adapter hose. You can reuse your lids and seal dry goods and extend their shelf life for months, maybe even years. Okay? And it requires no electricity, and it takes your mason jars and adds a second use for them, and lids can be reused again and again even after they've been canned with. So this system is phenomenal for adding shelf life to dry goods and adding some multi-purpose use for your existing mason jars. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have some of your own mason jar systems. Bunch of mason jars lying around. But anyways, I hope this was informative to you guys. This has been a couple of years in the making, and I hope this was helpful. One thing I want to talk about before this end the video. This pump and seal here, the top of it tends to come off. Let me just pull this off and show you guys. So the You might find that when you're using it, this guy suddenly, this bar, the pump here just suddenly comes off. It's not a big deal. You just need to put the washer on top of the little O-ring, the like fabric O-ring, I don't know what that thing's called. And then the spring in that order, like this. Hold this back, and then you just screw on this little part of the pump here where it's got a little O-ring, and then you just push it back in. It's not a huge deal. It's kind of annoying, but I really don't have to deal with it all that often. Just make sure it's firmly on. But yeah, just I wanted to tell that for anybody who runs into that. It's like, it broke, you totally told me this product is awesome, but it sucks. No, just put it back together. I've fixed this thing 20, 30 times, have had no problems with it. It still works fantastic. Nice thing also is that it's really simple. I mean, you just saw the insides, that's it. It's a cylinder with a little washer and a little pump, and you pump it up and down. That's it. It's really nice and simple and easy to repair, even if you're not that experienced. I mean, trying to repair something like this or something like this might be pretty intimidating to people, but this guy, you just saw how easy it is to fix this guy. It takes all of 30 seconds. All right, well, I hope this video was informative to you guys and kind of open your eyes to the multifunctionality of mason jars. I mean, they've already got a ton of uses, and this is another one. Thanks for watching, and please remember to like and subscribe.